Classic Restos is proudly brought to you by Shannons Insurance, where you can be a member of the Shannons Club. Pace Farm, the enjoyable egg. Hare and Forbes Machinery House. And Gun Lake Quarries.
Well, if there's one Mopar show that enthusiasts wait for every year, more than a box of parts turning up at your front door, it would have to be Chryslers on the Murray. And you're about to see a bit of it for 2020 on this week's episode of Classic Restos. Chryslers on the Murray, brought to us every year by the Albury Wodonga Chrysler Club, one of the smaller car clubs putting on one of the biggest events. Now, on last year's episode, I started by saying that Chryslers on the Murray is the largest outdoor Mopar event in the southern hemisphere. So I won't be saying that on this year's show, but it is the largest Chrysler event in Australia, so let's get into it. Okay, it's Friday, it's day one, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, and we are here at the Driver Education Centre of Australia, where some entrants for Chryslers on the Murray have gathered for the sprints. Chryslers on the Murray is a jam-packed event. You've just seen some of the sprints. It's now 1 p.m. and time for the Go to Woe. Last year, 2019, saw the newest introduction here to Chryslers on the Murray, and it's called the Great Reveal. It kind of helps round off Friday night. Behind me lurks 8 very special cars undercover, and we're about to find out what special car is hiding under each one. Well, here we are, back again, Chryslers on the Murray for 2020. How you doing, Mick?
I'm very good, thanks, Fletch. Yourself?
Good, mate, good, beautiful car. Saw you yesterday at the sprints. You did a sensational job in this AP6 wagon. What a stunning car.
Well, thank you, mate. It basically got in here untested. The car was only just finished before we left. It seemed to be running fine, so I thought I'm going to go out there and have a crack and see how we go.
Awesome work, awesome work. Now we're talking a concourse car here, a 1965, a wagon.
It's the Canadian version, which you've brought to my attention, and with the different tail lights, which are very, very cool.
That's correct. Yeah, the Australian-built ones have the strip tail lights. The Canadian have the round tail lights in the back, and there's not as many around, so it's good to see.
I don't think there'd be an enthusiast on the planet that wouldn't agree that these wagons are just such a beautiful style. Even the swage lines in the roof turret, I guess, designed to be underneath a luggage bar or a roof rack.
Yeah, that's true. I think they were meant for a family car, back in the day. But now they've just got style written all over them, and I just love the wagon. They're great shape.
Where did you get the car from, Mick?
Right, we found it local. We're Adelaide people. And I was actually taking my son to the airport and just caught this wagon in the corner of my eyes. I was driving down the road and I just had to stop and knock on the door, and I spoke to the fella. So I offered to buy it, and we did the deal then.
Now, we get down to the to the business end of what you've done here. You've done some incredible work. We're not talking a slant six here, we're talking a Hemi that's been shoehorned into the front of this thing. Not only are we talking a Hemi, which you can tell us about in a moment, but it's your attention to detail as well. The intake work, and through the front radiator support panel, what you've done there, some of the workmanship here is some of the neatest that I've ever seen, Mick.
Well, thank you, mate. I'm happy to hear that. It's been a 5-year project, and given that, it's given us a lot of time to think about the little things and just try and get it right. So what I wanted to produce was an old car with new running gear, but still have that period correct look.
You did fantastic yesterday in the sprints. You're at the great reveal last night, and at first, at a glance, when you look at the engine bay of this car, I thought to myself, this guy's put a 50s Hemi in. It's one of the firepowers. Tell us what Hemi it is.
Look, it's a 5.7 Gen 3 Hemi out of a Chrysler 300C, and still got the standard 5-speed automatic that goes with it. So we've had to cut the tunnel out and centre it, make it bigger, of course, because the trans is so much bigger than standard, and 9-inch rear end, 4-wheel disc brakes, twin brake boosters, master cylinder on the brake pedal. The list goes on. Power steering and air conditioning also.
They're a beautiful Valiant, this model, there's no doubt about it. Obviously the American derivative based on the Barracuda. Some nice little appointments inside, nice embellishments, some bright work. You've got your stereo there and the glove box hiding behind the door. Great job, mate. We could talk a lot longer on this. Mick, thanks for bringing it along for Chrysler on the Murray for 2020. It's great to see this. Every year, of course, new cars come along, and this is one of them. Good on you, Mick.
Appreciate it, Fletch. Thank you very much. We're in for a good day today. Can't wait.
You're welcome. Thanks, mate.
Cheers.
I spend a lot of time out here. The RT Charger's the real deal. An E49. Remember A-Charger? I've always got projects on the go, so Shannon's laid-up cover helps protect my restorations. I'm Mopar through and through. It's a passion Shannon's understands. I wouldn't insure my cars and bikes with anyone else.
Shannons, insurance for motoring enthusiasts. Call 13 46 46 for a quote.
In 2020, why not consider a Detroit tour with Fletch? Detroit, the automotive epicenter. It will leave you gobsmacked. Imagine experiencing where automotive history on a grand scale began. Stay in fine accommodation, taking in some of the best museums and private car collections on the planet. Book your 2020 Detroit tour with Fletch.
Okay, making our way through Chryslers on the Murray for 2020. We're in the Gen 3 Hemi section of the event. How you doing, Tommy?
Yeah, not too bad, Fletch. How you going?
Good, mate, good. Now, yesterday at the sprints, you did exceptionally well in this car. There's a bit of a story here. Tommy's got a 69 VF four-door car, just a plain Jane Val, but he's got something very special up front. I'd like to share with us what you've done there.
Up at the front, we've got the 6.1 Hemi Gen 3. It all started about 3 years ago. I had a cranky old V8 and I decided to switch to the injected way and did a bit of a resto mod. So, look, only gone forward from here and really happy with it.
You've got over 500 horsepower, correct?
Correct, yep.
Now, I think overnight something's happened to his back wheels because he's bolted some wides on. Yesterday, correct me if I'm wrong, Tommy, but you were getting around the sprints with like a 195 tyre on the back there.
Something like that, yeah, 185, and it was getting a bit hairy in the back.
It was quite entertaining watching you going around, and I've got to give you some credit. You were hanging on and you were doing a good job.
Practice makes perfect, mate.
Absolutely. Now, share with us the story of how you acquired this car, because I think this is pretty neat as well.
Yeah. All right, so I was about 16 years old, turning 17. I was looking for an old car. You know, my brother was into the Valiants. He had an old CL, and I said, look, I've got to get one before I get my Ps. And he searched this car up on car sales, and, you know, stock-looking VF 1969, had the original owner, so went and had a look at it, and you know what, I fell in love with it. I was sold. It was completely original, and that's it. It's been 10 years now, so...
Walk us through in terms of putting the high-tech engine in. Hard job to do. Did it take much working out, or did it go pretty well?
To be honest, it actually went pretty smooth and well. Considering I did it about 3 years ago, there wasn't much on the market for these things. So I went with the custom mounts, custom pipes, and that was pretty much the biggest hurdle. The 727 gearbox that I'm running bolts right up to it, so there's no issue there.
I think it's pretty cool to think that you can get such a relatively basic car and do that retro mod fit and not have to do too much suspension-wise for the result that you've ended up with. It's certainly doing the job, mate. Good on you. It's also good to see next generation coming through with the age of these cars and the appreciation with you and your mates that you have for them as well, mate. So good on you, Tommy. Well done.
Thank you much. Thank you for your time, Fletch.
The AMC fraternity are always welcome here at Chryslers on the Murray. And back in the day, AMC built some pretty serious gear. And it's only once a year that you'll find so many AMCs here in one location. Making our way through now, time for the AMC segment part of Chryslers on the Murray for 2020. How you doing, Reno?
Yeah, good, Fletch.
That's good. I love your car.
Yeah, it was Dad's original car. He bought it brand new, February the 14th, 1966, the day they changed pounds to dollars.
How cool is that? That's the first time in the history of classic restos I've ever heard that.
Yep, and it was $4,000 exactly.
Unbelievable. You've had this car in the family since brand new. You've done the restoration. When did you do it and what was your build time?
Well, first it went off the road, and when cars went off the road, they were just used as a paddock basher. And that's what we used to do, and we couldn't kill it. And then just parked in the back shed for 10 or 15 years, till one day I had a midlife crisis and decided to restore it.
It's interesting too, a very expensive car, Reno, from back in the day.
Yeah, that's right. Because it had to be Australian import and whatever and rules, there was a lot of Australian parts put into them.
It was like twice the price of a Falcon.
That's right, yeah.
We've got a 287 cube V8 up front as well. Interesting with the Borg Warner transmission as well. I would assume it's a Borg 35, is that correct?
Yeah, American version. It's the American Borg Warner.
Reno, the interior of the car, I know that the car has gone through a restoration. I'm assuming again that's the original interior of the car?
Yep, original style, yeah.
It's interesting too, the Australian market back in the day offering these cars, American motor cars, and they were assembled here in Australia. Again, back in a time where talk about jobs, our manufacturing was just right up there, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Now, Reno, there's some photos on the side glass there of you and your sister there when you were younger, standing in the snow. A couple of little pictures there of the car when it was a shell and when you were going through the restoration. How was it as a project?
Oh, well, it was time consuming. It took me 5 years all up. But the car was complete. Everything, there was nothing really missing, just little bits and pieces. But anyway, it took 5 years to do, yeah.
Reno, I love the restoration. What you've done here, taking the car back to very close to how the car was bought by your father back in 1966, and you've represented the American Motors fraternity here proudly today, and thanks for the interview on Classic Restos.
Okay, thanks, Fletch.
Like Dad, I've always been a Ford man. The Falcon Squire wagon was unloved in 1964, but turns heads today. The Americans call them woodies, but the panelling, it's just fiberglass and plastic. But it's a passion that Shannons understands, which is why my Fords are insured with Shannons. And now, So's the home.
Call Shannons on 13 46 46. Shannons, insurance for motoring enthusiasts.
Hare & Forbes Machinery House has been family owned and operated for over 85 years, and it's easy to see why. Planning on welding? Look at these welding tables and clamps, air compressors and different air tools, sandblasting cabinets, through to spray guns. Everyone is welcome at Machinery House. There are competitive freight rates around Australia, and you can buy online at machineryhouse.com.au. So remember, Hare & Forbes has the range. And of course, if you own a classic, it just has to be insured with Shannons, because they're the best. Why not pick up the phone and give Shannons a call for a quote and a chat on 134646. And Shannons have their own productions, such as Shannons Club TV with Mark Osler and Dr. John, various people with Driven, and of course Shane Jacobson with End of an Era. And there are also over 320 episodes of classic Restos awaiting you on the Shannons Club as well. For more information, visit shannons.com.au.
Chryslers on the Murray 2020. This is it, the largest outdoor Mopar show in the Southern Hemisphere. Now, last year we were approaching 900 cars. We've gone over 900 for this year. What an outstanding result, Glenn.
Yeah, it is good, Fletch. We did break the record, so yeah, the club's happy about that.
There's so many different things to look at Chryslers on the Murray. There's so many different categories. Trying to do an episode here, it's really just putting a toe in the water. Now, one of the categories this year, the spotlight emphasis on American muscle, 62 through to 74. Thought we'd choose this car here. Now, this is a car that slips under the radar a little bit, but they really held their own. We've got a 340 powered 71 Demon. Now, if you don't know, we never got these cars in Australia, obviously, but when you look around the engine bay and under the bonnet, our Australian sold Valiants were derivatives of these very cars, Glenn.
They were, yep, and the Chargers had the 340s in them, which are a race-bred motor from the factory. So yeah, they are a good thing.
But even when you look around the inner skirts, when you look at the shape of the structure, our cars exactly the same. We just didn't get this shape, which America had lots of different shapes. Now, 71 Demon, interesting with the marketing here, was condemned by a lot of people because of the relation to the demon. I guess the religious people didn't like that back then.
Yeah, Fletch. They only had the name badge for 2 years, and the Christian groups in America hounded Dodge to say, drop the nameplate, you can't be putting demon badges on a car. And after 2 years, they gave in, and then 73 onwards, they called them the Dodge Dart.
Interesting too, when Glenn went to register this car, he told me before we started filming that his registration price was
$666.
3 sixes.
The number of the beast.
Now, these Demons certainly fitted the muscle car era. Well, it wasn't long after 1971 everything started to drop off. We started getting lower compressions, doughier camshafts. Engines had to meet emissions laws, and well, some of the fun went away. But this car here, the 340, was a screamer of an engine. It was actually technically a big block engine because its bore exceeded 101.6 millimetres. It was bigger than a 4-inch bore, more like getting up towards your 383s and 400s and above in those big block sizes. So we had a technical, well, a small block car with a big displacement that really screamed.
Yeah, they're a high revving engine. You could rev them to 6,000 RPM, and they were a joint killer. They could keep up with the big block boys for sure.
Now let's have a look at the aesthetics of this car. Wow, it's a plain Jane. I guess it's a wolf in sheep's clothing, I guess, when you look at it.
Yeah, they were a very base, cheap model, base entry muscle car in their day. So yeah, no wind up. The windows down the back didn't even wind down; they just popped out. They were you didn't get power windows, electric aerials, things like that. You could get them with power steering and air conditioning, but yeah, they were an entry-level muscle car in America.
When you look inside the bench seat, there's something, I don't know what that is. There's something about a bench seat and the 4-speed stick there.
Yeah, it does look quite. I like the look.
How was the car when you found it, and what have you done yourself?
I bought it here. I saw it here for sale 5 years ago, and I bought it from a bloke called Sam in Melbourne, and he bought it into the States about 6 or 7 years ago when our dollar was as strong as theirs. The car's pretty much how I got it, as you see it. I've just refined it. I've just done some stuff to the motor, touched the gearbox, rebuilt the diff, but pretty much the car's just how it is, how I bought it.
Glenn, it's been wonderful interviewing you, mate. You have made the grade on this episode for the American Muscle, the Mopar Muscle from 62 to 74 category. Thank you, mate.
Thanks, Fletch.
Every year at Chryslers on the Murray, there's usually a special guest from the United States of America, and in 2020 there's no exception. Matty Dean from Glendora Dodge, California. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, Fletch. How are you?
Good. You enjoying yourself?
Very much so. It's a great show.
Isn't it wonderful? I believe this is your first time here.
First time in Australia. Came specifically for this show.
Well, you can't get better than that if you're a Mopar guy, right?
Very true, very true.
So tell us through your eyes, you've been in the game a long time over there, Matt. Here at Chryslers on the Murray, are you impressed with what you're seeing?
Oh, yeah, very much so. Even the photo shoot that we did yesterday with the U.S. cars, loved the cars that were there. They would compete in any show we had in the U.S.
I'm noticing the same. And when you look at the old pro rata, and you guys having about 12, 13 times our population in the United States, we can put on a Chrysler show here in the Southern Hemisphere and knock on the door of 1,000 cars. We've just gone over the 900. It's pretty impressive stuff, isn't it?
Very much so. I mean, we've talked about a show that we have in Los Angeles. It's all Chryslers, and we struggle to get 800 cars. And that's in the population of what you have in all of Australia.
Well, to keep in mind too, if it wasn't for you guys, there'd be no Valiants here in this country. Everything came from the United States. They were the derivatives. This is where Plymouth started with the Valiant, and it just went from there. And we got some bits and pieces down here that were legendary cars. They were great cars. Of course, over in the United States, you guys had more range, you had more shapes, and of course, starting back in mid-50s, of course, with the early Hemi.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of legacy there.
Boy, that's the truth. It all started from there and has continued on. Even in our drag racing now, they still run the Hemi in the top fuel and funny cars. So it's all Chrysler power.
Now, at Glendora, around 40 years, tell us your role there.
Originally started as a parts driver. Came in, my job was checking parts, deliver parts, and over the years came up. I'm now a parts manager and have been the parts manager since 1983. Had a short stint where for about 6 or 7 years I worked for Keith Black Racing Engines. And then came back to the dealership again, and this time around I've been there for 22 years now.
It's a wonder the dealership's not called Matt Dean.
I've heard that from several people, yeah. But I can't, we've always been into the performance side of it. We were one of the first dealers back in the 70s to be a direct connection dealer. Yeah. So that's kind of been our forte, and that's why I have stayed there so long, because if I had to sell oil filters all day long for diesel trucks, I'd probably go crazy.
Who wants the hassles of running a dealership when you can have as much fun just staying in the parts department?
Exactly, and doing the shows like this that I get to go to. We do several shows around the U.S. where we actually take and I sell parts at the performance parts at the shows.
Matt, I could talk to you all day long. He's a great guy, special guest from the United States. Matt, it's been wonderful catching up with you. Thank you for making the trip out, and I'm sure that us Aussies are making you feel very welcome down under.
Very much so. It's been a pleasure, and I've enjoyed it. It's good seeing you again.
Another mainstay here at Chryslers on the Murray each and every year is the Shannons Top 10, which comprises 5 top cars from the good old US of A, along with 5 top cars from Aussie. Well, when it comes time for a wagon, bit of limo, some class, opulent styling, wow, this car behind us is really something. How you doing, Charles?
Fantastic, thanks, Fletch.
So, Wayne, mate, you brought this along. If the car is for sale, I don't think you should have any trouble moving it this weekend.
No, I don't think we will have any trouble moving it. It's a fantastic car. We've had it at our workshop at Motor Rico in Wodonga for just on a year. It came here last year and it was seized, which we then tilt-trade it back to our workshop, and it's been a job of 12 months restoring it back to its former glory.
You have done an amazing job. We're looking at a 1964 New Yorker, a wagon, 413 wedge engine up front. Wow, what a mover back in its time.
It was, and we've all the componentry that we've put into the engine came from America.
The size of this wagon, you could just imagine who may have had it in the day. it would have been a pretty comfortable family for the kids to be dropped off to school coming out of this.
Absolutely, and heaps of room, and they made these cars to last. Like, this is testimonial to this car here today. That's just looks great and sounds fantastic.
The interior is just so, well, it's just so 1964. It's opulent. I love that dashboard. I just adore the shape of these things. They've got so much personality. If they could talk, they'd talk the leg off an iron pipe. These cars really made a statement. Speaking of which, in terms of the history, is it true that, what's the thoughts on who might have had this car?
Well, we don't actually know who had the car, but we believe that it could have been a celebrity that owned it, but at this stage we don't know who owned the car. Yeah.
You could just imagine Dean Martin stepping out of it.
Oh, absolutely. Anyone. And it's such, I drove it for the first time down here at Chrysler on the Murray on Saturday morning, and I followed, we had a couple of cars in front of us, which were in our group, and I had my elbow hanging out the door, left-hand drive, and it feels like a real muscle car.
Yeah.
And yet it's a family car, but it's just got so much feel about that car.
Yeah. Good on you, Charles. I like what you've done to this. I love the car, and the rarity. Rarity is the biggest thing.
Oh, absolutely. This is the only car in Australia of this type, and there's one more in New Zealand, and they are the only two. Yeah. And it's so rare, but it's just a lovely car to drive.
It'll look good in my shed.
It would look good in your shed.
Charles, thanks again for your time, mate.
Thanks, Fletch. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you, mate. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Bye.
Well, there you have it. You have seen just some of the amazing Chryslers on the Murray event for 2020. It's a huge thanks to Rod Taylor and the team at the Albury Wodonga Chrysler Club. In excess of 900 vehicles this year, and rumoured to be even more in 2021 as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Australian Valiant Charger. As I say at the end of every episode of Classic Restos, no matter where you're watching the show from, until next week, please ride and drive safe. I'm Fletch, and I thank you very much for watching. You can like and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/ClassicRestosTV and watch catch-up episodes at shannons.com.au.
Classic Restos is proudly brought to you by Shannons Insurance, where you can be a member of the Shannons Club. Pace Farm, the enjoyable egg. Hare and Forbes Machinery House. And Gun Lake Quarries.